Hello and welcome. This is my third video looking at women in the Qur'an and the hadith. It is part of a broader series of videos talking about ethical problems in the Qur'an. In the first video on women, we looked at how women are seen as inferior to men and how they can be the victims of domestic violence. In the second video, we looked at how they could be forced to have sex with men, be them their husbands or their masters. And in this video, we're going to look more generally at the Islamic legal system, and we will see how the system was more generally unfair towards women. To begin with, let us look at the 178th ayah of the Surah of the Cow. Gender is not the focus here, but I have included it because the attitudes about gender are indirectly revealed. It is interesting because it outlines a certain mindset. This ayah is about the law of equalities and what is required in the case of murder. If someone in your tribe is murdered, you are allowed to murder back someone from the opposing tribe of equal value. That is, if a free man is murdered, a free man can be killed in retaliation. If a slave is killed, a slave can be killed in return. And right at the end, if a woman is murdered, then a woman can be killed in return. In terms of gender, we can see that a woman and a man are not seen to be equal. The implication is that a woman is worth even less than a slave because she appears last in the list and is seen as distinct from a free man. In this translation, it says a free for a free, but in other translations such as Abu Halimi, it says a man for a man. I have kept with this translation for consistency with the other quotations from the Quran, but if you go to the Arabic, the implication is a free man for a free man. Another ethical issue raised by this passage is the use of retaliatory murder. In my opinion, retaliatory murder is a bad way of quenching evil because when someone is murdered, it just encourages people to murder more people and thus violence spreads. To return to the subject of women, I really wanted to bring to your attention Ayah 282 from the Surah of the Cow. It says that if you have two witnesses in the situation of legalizing a contract, that you need two male witnesses. However, if you cannot find a second man, you can use two women instead, so that if one of the women forgets, the other one can remind her. This is very similar to this hadith which we looked at in the first video that says, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Isn't the witness of a woman equal to half that of a man?" The women said yes. He said, that is because of the deficiency of a woman's mind. Firstly, these passages are inaccurate because many of the women I know are much cleverer than the men I know. They are sometimes even more trustworthy. As an early British parliamentary reformer said, some women have as much moral courage as men have immoral courage. So Muhammad seemed to be quite off with this concept that women are mentally inferior to men. More profoundly, by making the witness of a woman worth half that of a man, they are permanently disadvantaged in a range of legal matters. There can't be a he said she said case, as a man's witness is always stronger. So if a woman is wrong, she has to show much more evidence since her witness is not as strong. This would also affect the testimony of the women around her. In a legal system where witnesses are the primary method of presenting evidence, this is a serious disadvantage. This puts women at a much weaker legal position. I want to briefly look at an example of injustice toward women preserved in Sahih Bukhari, Hadith 6842. In this hadith we are told about a man's son who has committed adultery with a married woman. When Muhammad pronounces judgment on the couple, we are told that the son is to receive 100 lashes and be banished for a year, whilst the woman is to be stoned to death. So here we can see the male was given a much lighter sentence despite stoning being the traditional punishment for adultery. Next, I want to talk about inheritance. For this we go back to the Surah of Women in the 11th ayah and the 176th ayah. What we find here are that women are given half the inheritance of a man. So, if you had a son and a daughter, your son would get 2/3 of your inheritance, and the daughter a third. When this is magnified up to a big family, which would have been more common at that time, where there were 10 children, 6 boys and 4 girls, then the inheritance for the girls would become very small. A number of my Muslim friends have justified this to me, saying that men, when they get married, will have to look after their own wives. Therefore, the daughters would receive money from their husbands, but the sons would have to provide for their wives. At this time, inheritance was a major way wealth was transferred. Wealth worked at a more tribal family level than individual. It was much harder to make your own way by hard work alone. Inheritance was a big deal. My response to my friend's argument goes something like this. There are quite a lot of situations where the Quranic teaching puts women at a substantial disadvantage. For example, if a woman married a man less wealthy than her father, she would wind up substantially less well off. More profoundly, it forces women to get married. It makes it much harder for them to inherit wealth in their own right, and thus act as a legitimate independent financial entity without a husband or a father. This system of inheritance compels women to get married if they want to be well provided for. However, once they are married, they will fall under the authority of their husbands, and as we have seen, they will have to obey their husbands, and they may not be able to keep control of even what inheritance they received once they are married. Certainly, I have known a number of families where this is exactly what has happened. To me, this shows that this is a fundamentally unjust law. It illustrates that it is often the combined effects of laws that produce injustice. The unfair inheritance laws force women to get married. Once married, they are in a subservient position where they can be heavily controlled and exploited. This position is reinforced by their lower value as legal witnesses and the harsher criteria for divorce, as discussed in the first videos, which all makes it far harder for women to escape. Holistically, at the time, Muhammad and his companions put women into a very repressed situation. It is the working out of these truths that make the current Islamic societies very unfair and not pleasant places for women to be living. The Quranic passages we have looked at are often used to justify the very poor treatment of women today. This video has not been an exhaustive look at Muhammad's legislative injustices towards women. My challenge to you now is to go and read the Surah of Women yourself and draw your own conclusions. I hope you have found this video useful. Feel free to comment below, and I look forward to hearing from you.